Welcome to vpod.ai. I'm Mike, your host for today, and I'm joined by our expert, Susan. You can sponsor this podcast for just $25. Your message will be featured across major platforms like Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, and more. If you're interested, visit vpod.ai to get started today.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
So to kick things off today, I want to talk about the 1995 to 1996 Orlando Magic.
Oh, wow. Just going right for the jugular.
I know. I apologize in advance to any sports fans out there for ripping open this wound right out of the gate.
It really is like a sore subject for a lot of people because that team, I mean, they were an absolute powerhouse. They had youth. They had all the momentum.
Yeah, they were terrifying to play against.
Exactly. Just terrifying.
And they finished that NBA season with a massive 60-22 record. They were absolute basketball royalty. Plus, they had the crown jewel of the league at the time, Shaquille O'Neal.
Right, Shaq.
But then, literally just weeks after the season ended, the unthinkable happened. Shaq just walked away.
He packed up and went to the Lakers.
Yeah, went to Los Angeles and then proceeded to win 3 consecutive championships, basically cementing himself as, one of the undisputed greatest of all time. And the Magic franchise was just left holding the bag.
It's the ultimate sports heartbreak. But it serves as this perfectly parallel example for the ultimate business heartbreak.
Which is
losing a top performer, dealing with sudden employee churn. It is completely devastating to an organization.
Yeah.
And we aren't just talking about, the inconvenience of having to hire someone new. The financial multiplier of losing like a text developer or a top-tier sales director, it actively destroys company valuations.
Because you lose all that institutional knowledge.
Yeah, exactly. You lose the knowledge, you shatter the team momentum. And what makes it sting even more, kind of like the Shaq situation, is that it's almost always preventable.
And that brings us to our actual mission for today. We're exploring the hidden mechanics of expectation setting, basically the entire life cycle of how you properly onboard people into an organization.
Right. We're looking at a 7-step framework from Bill Kerr. It's designed specifically to stop companies from hemorrhaging their own Shaquille O'Neals.
Yeah, and when we talk about setting expectations for a new hire, my mind immediately goes to a wildly different example. Do you remember that famous chest bump scene in the movie The Wolf of Wall Street?
Oh, man. Matthew McConaughey and Leonardo DiCaprio in the restaurant.
Yes.
Absolutely iconic. The humming, the chest thumping.
Right. So McConaughey is sitting there, and he's explaining the completely deranged, predatory rules of their firm to this wide-eyed DiCaprio. And obviously, it is an extreme and deeply unethical example. But playfully speaking, it's actually a masterclass.
It really is.
Yeah.
Because O'Conaughey's character, he wasn't leaving anything to chance.
Yep.
He was explicitly setting the culture, the cadences, and the baseline expectations of the role within minutes of meeting him.
Right.
Now, obviously, nobody listening to this should be setting expectations to, cheat and steal their way through the corporate world.
Let's hope not.
But the psychological mechanism at play is rock solid. How a relationship starts fundamentally dictates how it ends.
So let's look at the actual stakes here, because there is this massive gaping canyon between what employees desperately want when they start a new job and what companies are actually delivering.
Yeah, if you're a manager or a founder listening to this, the numbers should really be setting off alarm bells.
Give me the stats.
So the data paints a very stark picture. A Bamboo HR study recently found that new employees who go through a meticulously designed onboarding experience, they are 18 times more committed to their employer.
Wait, 18%?
No, 18 times. 18 multiples of commitment.
Oh, wow. Let that sink in. That is an astronomical return on investment. But then you look at the reality on the ground, right?
Right, because a separate Gallup study reveals that only 12% of employees strongly agree that their organization actually has a good onboarding process.
12%?
Yeah, the vast majority of people feel like they're just being thrown to the wolves.
So what does this actually mean for you as a leader? Well, the math is basically screaming at you. If you just take the time to build out a structured, intentional onboarding process, you are automatically going to beat 88% of the market.
Exactly. You will have a workforce that is 18 times more engaged than your competitors. That isn't just like a cute HR initiative. That is an absolute superpower for your bottom line.
And building that superpower, it requires a complete mental shift about when onboarding actually begins, doesn't it?
It does. Most people assume it starts on Monday morning at 9:00 a.m., when the person walks through the door.
Right. Day one.
But the most effective organizations, they start the process 2 weeks before the person is even officially hired.
See, this blew my mind when we were going through the material. The onboarding starts before the contract is even signed. It happens in the final interview. Step 1 is the pitch.
Right. The final interview shouldn't just be like a barrage of technical questions to grill the candidate. If you're dealing with true all-star talent, recruitment is a two-way street.
Right.
The leader of the company or the head of the division, they need to be on this final call specifically to pitch the vision of the world they are building.
There was that great example with Deal, right?
Yes. Look at Alex Bouaziz, the CEO of the HR platform Deal. During their hyperscale phase, when they were growing at a completely breakneck pace, he still personally interviewed their first 500 to 700 employees.
500 to 700? That's insane.
His reasoning was profound, but simple. People follow people, not entities.
Okay, I love the romanticism of that story, but I have to push back hard on the reality of it.
Okay, go for it.
Is that actually scalable for a growing business?
Yeah.
Because to me, it sounds a bit like a head chef coming out of the kitchen during a Friday night dinner rush to personally serve the appetizer to every single table.
Right.
Like, it's an incredible, unforgettable touch for those specific diners, but it doesn't scale forever. Eventually, that chef is going to burn the main courses because they aren't actually back there cooking, you know?
I see where you're going with the restaurant analogy, but I'd argue that you're misunderstanding the CEO's primary job.
How so?
The CEO's job isn't cooking the food. Their job is building the kitchen staff.
Ah, okay.
The product is entirely secondary to the people making the product. If Alex Bouaziz doesn't recruit those first 500 evangelists with his own unbridled enthusiasm, Deal never achieves the scale to even need a chef in the first place.
That's a fair point.
When a founder takes the time to pitch their vision directly, it rewires the candidate's brain. It shows them they aren't just, a cog in a corporate machine. They're a vital character in a mission.
Right, it gives them purpose.
Yes.
Yeah.
Eventually, that responsibility shifts from the CEO down to senior leadership, but the core philosophy must survive. You have to aggressively sell the vision before the ink dries.
Okay, I can concede that.
Hey.
The ROI on creating evangelists out of your early hires definitely outweighs the time cost. You set the hook, they fall in love with the vision, they sign the contract, but then we hit this incredibly dangerous psychological gap.
Oh, the waiting period.
Yes, they've given their 2 weeks notice at their old job.
Yeah.
They're just sitting at home waiting for their start date.
This is perhaps the most vulnerable window in the entire employee life cycle.
Really?
Absolutely. Because the moment that contract is signed, the candidate's brain is flooded with a very specific, evolutionarily driven fear.
Buyer's remorse.
Exactly. Buyer's remorse.
It's so true, though, even if you hated your old job. I remember reading in the notes that staying at a toxic old job is described as being as enjoyable as grinding glass in your teeth.
It's awful.
But at least you knew what kind of glass it was.
Exactly.
It was a known quantity.
Yeah.
Now you've signed this new piece of paper, you've severed your safety net, and you were just petrified of the unknown.
Let's look at the neuroscience of what's happening there. The brain craves predictability. When you eliminate predictability by quitting your job, your amygdala, which is the fear center of your brain, it treats it as a literal survival threat. Cortisol levels spike. They are sitting on their couch wondering, did I make a colossal mistake? Is my new boss going to be a tyrant? Will anyone even talk to me?
Total panic.
Right. And to combat this biochemical panic, the most elite organizations deploy something called a vibe avalanche.
Step 2, the vibe avalanche. The branding on that alone is just phenomenal.
It really is. The
Yeah.
premise is to overwhelm the candidate with proactive, highly positive energy immediately after they sign. You absolutely do not wait for day one.
So what does the avalanche actually look like?
It means firing off the welcome email within hours. It means sending over the employee handbook, laying out a crystal clear schedule for their entire first week, granting them their software access early, and this is the absolute silver bullet, assigning them a dedicated onboarding buddy who reaches out just to say hello.
See, this reminds me entirely of buying a house.
Oh, that's a good comparison.
Right. You spend months looking. You finally find the one. You sit at the enormous mahogany table and sign the massive stack of mortgage papers.
And your hand is cramping.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the moment the ink is dry, you don't feel happy. You feel pure, unadulterated panic.
What did I just do?
Yes. You immediately start worrying about the plumbing or if the roof is going to cave in and bankrupt you. The vibe avalanche is like having your real estate agent show up on your doorstep the very next morning with a beautiful gift basket, a personalized guide to the best local pizza places, and like a list of heavily vetted, trusted contractors.
Because that real estate agent understands that their job isn't over just because the transaction cleared, they are actively managing your cognitive load.
Right. They're taking the burden off you.
By providing those resources, they are replacing your fear of the unknown with actionable excitement. HR teams need to function exactly like that agent. You have to be the one handing the new hire the keys to the neighborhood.
Not the one leaving them alone in an empty house to worry about the flood risks.
Precisely. If you leave a void of communication between the signing and the start date, the employee's anxiety will inevitably fill that void. The vibe avalanche slams the door on buyer's remorse before it even has a chance to unpack its bags.
All right, so the pre-hire anxiety is successfully neutralized. Now we move into the actual start date. They're logging into their laptop for the first time, or they're walking through the physical office doors.
Right, the environment shifts.
The focus has to shift from emotional reassurance to absolute logistical clarity. Let's talk about step 3, minute 1.
Minute 1 is crucial. The rule here is incredibly simple but heavily overlooked. On Monday morning, the very first face the new hire should see on a group call is the leader of the organization.
Just right away.
Yes. Whether that is the founder, the CEO, or the president, the person steering the ship must spend just 3 to 5 minutes officially welcoming the newcomers.
It sets an immediate tone of respect. But right after that, we transition into step 4, day 1. This is where HR and the direct manager take over, and this is where a terrifying amount of companies completely fall apart.
The statistics on this are frankly embarrassing for the corporate world. Currently, 42% of HR professionals openly admit that their company's internal information is far too scattered across different platforms and legacy systems.
Almost half. Nearly half of HR professionals were basically saying, yeah, our internal files are a complete dumpster fire.
It's a disaster.
That is an absolute nightmare for someone who just started.
It creates an immense amount of unnecessary friction. To solve this, the framework we're looking at strongly advocates for building a centralized, single source of truth onboarding hub.
What does that look like in practice?
Take a company like Athena, for example. They use Notion to build a highly customized personal hub for every single new member.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, this hub holds all the relevant corporate policies, the organizational structures, deep dives into their specific team, and a fully editable checklist for their initial tasks. Everything exists in one neatly organized digital room.
Okay, I have to challenge this setup, though, specifically how it relates back to minute 1. Let's say the CEO pops in to say a warm hello, but the internal files are still a disaster. Isn't that CEO welcome just entirely performative?
Well,
I'm thinking about this like a theme park. Imagine you show up to a famous theme park, right? And the CEO is standing right at the front gate. He shakes your hand, gives you a huge warm smile, and you feel incredibly valued.
Sure.
But then you walk inside, and the map they handed you is written in a foreign language. The signs point to rides that don't exist, and the roller coasters are rusted and broken. The CEO greeting was nice, but you are still going to have a miserable, frustrating time in the park. The greeting was essentially fake.
I have to stop you there because calling the welcome performative completely misses the human element of leadership.
Okay, how so?
The greeting isn't fake, it's the relational anchor. Yes, the map needs to work, but human connection absolutely has to precede logistical clarity. Think about it. If there's no leader at the gate welcoming you, you don't even care about the map.
You just feel like a trespasser.
Exactly. You're just wandering around a corporate lot. The minute 1 welcome and the day 1 centralized hub, they have to work in tandem. The CEO's welcome is the promise of the culture, and the centralized hub is the delivery of that promise.
Okay, that makes sense.
The hub matters because it gives the employee agency. It lowers their cortisol levels because they aren't constantly having to tap a stranger on the shoulder just to ask where a basic PDF is located.
That's a fair distinction. So you've welcomed them, you've handed them a working, localized map, and you've given them agency. But a map doesn't make someone love the theme park.
No, it doesn't.
It just stops them from getting hopelessly lost. You need a compelling narrative to make them actually care about the park itself. Which brings us to step 5, day 2.
Day 2 is arguably the most powerful differentiator in this entire framework. It's dedicated to the culture and the story. Specifically, running a dedicated brand story session.
And just to clarify for everyone listening, this is not your standard legally mandated HR compliance meeting about where the fire exits are located.
Not at all. This is about sharing the gritty, unwritten history of the company. It's the corporate lore. And it requires a massive amount of vulnerability from the leadership team.
Give me an example.
Going back to Athena's onboarding process, their leadership doesn't just read a mission statement, they share deeply humanizing details. They talk about the specific book, Mythos, that inspired the company name. They break down the early, messy dynamics between the co-founders.
And they share the battle scars, too. I was stunned to read that they actually tell brand new hires about how they lost 70% of their entire revenue in just 3 weeks during the height of COVID.
Yeah, that's huge.
They explicitly explain how they only had days of financial runway left to survive.
They lay it all out on the table. They also dive into their quirky internal culture, like explaining why the company motto is, "What would Ned Stark do?"
As a huge Game of Thrones fan, I deeply appreciate that.
Yes.
Ned Stark is the ultimate pop culture symbol of doing the hard, honorable thing, even when it costs you absolutely everything. But taking a step back from the pop culture reference, think about the immense vulnerability required to stand in front of a room of new employees and say, hey, a few years ago, we were days away from total bankruptcy and failure.
It's terrifying for a lot of leaders.
It's the difference between reading a sanitized, legally approved corporate Wikipedia page and sitting around a campfire in the dark, hearing real war stories from the veterans who survived. Showing those near-death business experiences proves to the new hire that the company is real, it's resilient, and it's built on trust.
The psychology of vulnerability is fascinating here. Most companies hide their near failures because they think it makes them look weak to new talent.
Yeah.
But by sharing those moments of sheer panic and survival, you are actively inviting the new hire into a shared journey. You're telling them, we survive hard things together.
That builds serious loyalty.
It does. When Athena gathers internal data, these brand story sessions are universally rated as the highest impact moment of the entire onboarding process.
I believe it. So they are emotionally invested through the campfire stories. They understand the map. Now we move into step 6, which happens through the rest of week 1, and it's focused on the onboarding flow.
The flow is where you get into the standard functional sessions, the deep dives into the sales department, the product roadmaps, the marketing strategies.
The day-to-day stuff?
Right. But the secret mechanism here is using these functional sessions to aggressively cross-pollinate relationships across different departments early on.
So they aren't just stuck in their own bubble.
Exactly. You are intentionally breaking down corporate silos before they even have a chance to form. It's not just about learning how to use the proprietary software. It's about having a coffee with the engineers who actually built the software.
And I imagine you also want to get them actually doing the work, right?
Absolutely. You want to assign initial, highly manageable projects during this first week. This triggers an early dopamine hit.
Makes them feel useful.
Yes. They get to immediately apply what they are learning, score some early wins, and feel like they are actively contributing to the bottom line rather than just studying it.
Okay, so the employee is integrated. They are doing real work, they understand the software, and they're completely aligned with the culture. Everything is humming along smoothly. But we aren't done. How do we actually close the loop on this entire process?
The loop closes around week 4. This is step 7, the official wrap-up.
What does a truly effective wrap-up look like in practice?
It serves a dual purpose. First, you celebrate the milestone. You conduct a 30-day performance review to discuss their initial progress, highlight their strengths, and identify any blind spots where they might need more scaffolding or support.
Makes sense.
But the second part is where the vast majority of the corporate world completely drops the ball. You must systematically gather feedback from the employee on the onboarding process itself.
Oh boy. Let me guess. The corporate stats on gathering feedback are just as depressing as the scattered info stats we talked about earlier.
Worse, actually. A recent Chart Expo statistic reveals that an astounding 55% of companies do not gather any feedback whatsoever on their onboarding process.
Over half of companies don't even ask. Why? Is it just administrative laziness, or are HR departments genuinely terrified of what they might hear?
It is heavily skewed toward fear.
Really?
Designing a comprehensive onboarding program is an exhausting, monumental task. Once it's finally built, it often feels like a house of cards held together by duct tape.
Right.
HR teams just want to set it and forget it. Opening that process up to brutal criticism means acknowledging the duct tape, which creates more work to fix it.
Yeah,
But ignoring that feedback is corporate negligence. The people who just went through your gauntlet are the only ones who can objectively tell you where your map was confusing or where your vibe avalanche felt a little too light.
It's exactly like cooking a massive, complex meal for a group of VIP guests and then intentionally leaving the dining room while they eat just so you don't have to see them making faces if they hate the seasoning. You learn absolutely nothing for the next time you have to cook.
Precisely. Closing this feedback loop is the only mechanism that allows the company culture to actually evolve and strengthen over time rather than just stagnating. It brings to mind a fantastic quote from Brian Chesky, the CEO of Airbnb.
What did he say?
He defined it perfectly when he said, "Culture is simply a shared way of doing something with a passion."
A shared way of doing something with a passion. I love the simplicity of that. It strips away all the meaningless corporate buzzwords.
It really does.
It's not about ping pong tables in the break room or free snacks on Fridays. It's about how we operate together and actually giving a damn about the outcome.
But that shared way of doing things doesn't just spontaneously generate out of thin air. It has to be meticulously taught, demonstrated by leadership, and fiercely protected from the very first minute.
So we've navigated this entire journey today. From pitching the grand vision in the final interview to triggering a massive vibe avalanche to kill buyer's remorse before it even starts. We've debated the CEO's welcome, the necessity of a centralized digital hub so nobody gets lost in the theme park.
Sharing the gritty campfire stories of survival.
Exactly. Cross-pollinating the departments to break down silos, and finally actually having the courage to ask them how the experience was in week 4.
When you lay it all out chronologically like that, it becomes incredibly obvious that onboarding is not an administrative HR checklist. It is the architectural foundation of your entire company culture.
Which brings me to a final thought I want to leave you with today. We started this discussion by talking about the Orlando Magic losing Shaquille O'Neal, a devastating, franchise-altering loss of top-tier talent. But think about this from a slightly different, much more revealing angle. If a company's onboarding process is sloppy, if it's cold, if the information is hopelessly scattered, and nobody has the courage to ask for feedback, what does that say about how they secretly treat their paying customers?
Oof, that's a great point.
We keep coming back to the phrase, how it starts is how it ends. So maybe, just maybe, a company's onboarding process isn't just a strategy for employee retention. Maybe it is actually the ultimate mirror reflecting a company's true soul.
That is a profound perspective. The internal chaos or care of an organization always, eventually, bleeds out into the public view.
Something to seriously mull over the next time you welcome a new face to your team. Are you thumping your chest and deliberately setting the right expectations, or are you just handing them a broken map and wishing them luck? Thanks for joining us today. Until next time, keep questioning the map.